The whispers followed Abigail Forrester like the dust that kicked up behind her worn boots as she crossed Fort Bridger's muddy Main Street in the spring of 1876. She kept her gaze fixed forward, pretending not to hear the hushed voices that carried on the Wyoming wind, but their words cut deeper than any knife could. There goes that Forrester woman. Strange as they come. Face like that, no wonder she keeps to herself. Heard she ran off 3 suitors already. Unlovable, that one. Abigail clutched her market basket tighter, the scar that ran from her left temple to her jaw feeling particularly prominent today. The smallpox that had nearly claimed her life at 16 had left its permanent mark, both on her face and her place in society. At 24, she had long ago resigned herself to a life of solitude, finding comfort in her books and the small herb garden behind the modest cabin she'd inherited from her father. The general store's bell jingled as she entered, and the usual hush fell over the patrons. Mrs. Holbrook, the owner's wife, offered a tight smile as Abigail approached the counter. Just the usual, Miss Forrester. Yes, madam, and perhaps some peppermint if you have it. My tea supply is running low. As Mrs. Holbrook gathered her items, Abigail felt eyes boring into her back. She didn't need to turn to know it was Viola Simmons and her circle of friends, the self-appointed gossips of Fort Bridger. I heard she tried to make a love potion, one whispered, not quietly enough. Desperate times call for desperate measures, I suppose. Laughter, poorly disguised as coughs, followed. Abigail's cheeks burned, but she kept her composure, counting out coins from her small purse. The herbs she gathered were for healing, not love potions. The townsfolk had always been suspicious of her knowledge of plants and remedies, a skill her grandmother had passed down. It was easier to let them believe what they wanted than to defend herself. The door swung open with such force that the bell nearly flew off its hook. A tall figure filled the doorway, sunlight silhouetting broad shoulders and the unmistakable shape of a cowboy hat. Dust swirled around his boots as he stepped inside, bringing the scent of leather, horse, and open prairie with him. "Morning, folks," he called out, his voice carrying the slight drawl of Texas. "Fine day, ain't it?" The store erupted in greetings. New faces were always welcome in Fort Bridger, especially ones attached to strong backs and capable hands. Abigail kept her eyes down, finishing her transaction quickly. She needed to get home before the newcomer inevitably heard the whispers about the scarred spinster who lived on the edge of town. "Excuse me, miss." The deep voice addressed her directly as she turned to leave. "Might I trouble you for directions? Name's August O'Malley. Just rode in from Cheyenne." Abigail looked up, startled to be addressed so directly in public. The man before her had kind eyes the color of well-worn saddle leather and a smile that seemed genuine beneath his neatly trimmed beard. His hat was pushed back, revealing sun-streaked hair the color of wheat. "What are you looking for, Mr. O'Malley?" she managed, aware of the entire store watching this exchange. "The Caldwell Ranch. Hired on as their new foreman. Been told it's north of town, but these Wyoming hills all look the same to my Texas eyes. The Caldwell place is 3 miles north, following the creek," Abigail said softly. "You can't miss it. The big white barn with the red roof." August's smile widened, creating crinkles at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often. "Much obliged, Miss Forrester. Abigail Forrester." A sharp intake of breath from Viola's corner drew August's attention momentarily. When he looked back at Abigail, something in his expression had changed, not the usual pity or revulsion she was accustomed to seeing, but curiosity. "Miss Forrester," he repeated, tipping his hat. "Thank you kindly for your help. Perhaps we'll meet again." Abigail nodded curtly and slipped past him, feeling the weight of stares as she left. Outside, she took a deep breath of the clean mountain air, trying to calm her racing heart. Something about the way August O'Malley looked at her directly, without flinching at her scar, had unsettled her more than any cruel whisper ever could. She had nearly reached the edge of town when hoofbeats approached from behind. Glancing over her shoulder, she saw August O'Malley astride a magnificent chestnut gelding. "Mind if I walk with you a piece, Miss Forrester?" he called, slowing his horse to match her pace. "Seems I'm headed your direction anyway." Before she could formulate a response, he dismounted and fallen into step beside her, leading his horse by the reins. "I don't need an escort, Mr. O'Malley," she said stiffly. "Never said you did," he replied easily. "But a man gets lonely talking to his horse all day. Thought you might be willing to share a bit more about Fort Bridger. I aim to stay a while." Abigail studied him suspiciously. Men didn't seek her company without reason, usually involving her healing knowledge or, on rare occasions, a cruel wager among the cowhands. "What do you want to know?" she asked cautiously. "Everything," he said with a grin that seemed to light up his entire face. "Good fishing spots, which saloon doesn't water down their whiskey, where to find the best apple pie. And perhaps," he added more softly, "why a kind lady who gives directions to strangers gets treated like she's invisible by her own neighbors." Abigail stopped abruptly. "I don't need your pity, Mr. O'Malley." August shook his head. "Pity's not what I'm offering, Miss Forrester. Just conversation, and maybe friendship if you're amenable." "We've only just met," she said, resuming her walk. "Best time to start a friendship, I reckon," he replied, keeping pace. "Tomorrow would be too late and yesterday's already gone." Despite herself, Abigail felt the corners of her mouth twitch. "You're a peculiar man, Mr. O'Malley. August, please, and I've been called worse," he chuckled. "Stubborn, foolhardy, too handsome for my own good." This time Abigail couldn't suppress a small smile. "Modest, too, I see." "Never saw the point in false modesty," he said with a wink. "Life's too short." They walked in companionable silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the creak of his saddle leather and the soft nicker of his horse. Abigail found herself sneaking glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. There was something reassuring about his presence, solid and uncomplicated, like the mountains that surrounded Fort Bridger. When they reached the fork in the road where she would turn toward her cabin and he would continue to the Caldwell Ranch, August stopped. "Thank you for the company, Miss Forrester," he said, his tone sincere. "You're welcome, Mr. O'Malley, August," she corrected herself. He mounted his horse with fluid grace that spoke of years in the saddle. Looking down at her, his expression turned serious. "Those folks in town, they don't see you right." Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and clicked his tongue, urging his horse forward. "See you around, Abigail Forrester," he called over his shoulder. Abigail stood at the crossroads long after he disappeared from view, wondering what had just happened. For the first time in years, someone had looked at her, truly looked at her, and seemed to like what they saw. The notion was as terrifying as it was thrilling. For 3 days, Abigail saw no sign of August O'Malley. She told herself it was for the best, that their brief encounter had been nothing more than a moment of kindness from a stranger passing through her life. Men like August, handsome, charming, full of life, didn't befriend women like her, women the town had labeled damaged goods. On the 4th day, as she was gathering herbs in the meadow beyond her garden, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her look up. August sat atop his chestnut gelding, a wide smile breaking across his face when their eyes met. "Afternoon, Miss Forrester," he called, dismounting with that same easy grace she remembered. "Hope I'm not disturbing you." Abigail straightened, brushing dirt from her apron. "What are you doing here, Mr. O'Malley? Thought I'd bring you these," he said, reaching into his saddlebag and producing a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Noticed you buying peppermint at the store. Found some wild growing near the north pasture." Stunned, Abigail accepted the package. Carefully unwrapping it, she found a generous bundle of fresh peppermint, the leaves still vibrant and aromatic. "You remembered," she said softly. "I pay attention to things that matter," he replied, his voice equally soft. Their fingers brushed as she took the package, and Abigail felt a jolt of something unfamiliar, not unpleasant, but startling in its intensity. "Thank you," she said, stepping back slightly. "It's very thoughtful." August looked around her garden with genuine interest. "You've got quite the collection here. Herbs for cooking, some," she admitted. "Others for medicine, my grandmother taught me." His eyes lit up. "A healer, then? That explains a few things I've heard around town." Abigail tensed. "What things?" "That you've helped folks when the doctor was away. That your remedies work better than his sometimes." He grinned. "And that you're a witch who casts spells on unsuspecting cowboys." She looked away. "People fear what they don't understand." "Not all people," August said gently. "Some of us admire it." The sincerity in his voice made her meet his gaze again. There was no mockery there, only genuine admiration. "Would you show me?" he asked, gesturing to her garden. "I've always been curious about natural remedies. On the trail, a man learns to make do without doctors." Hesitantly, Abigail nodded. "I suppose I could." For the next hour, she showed him her garden, explaining the properties of each plant: yarrow for wounds, echinacea for colds, willow bark for pain. August listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that revealed a quick mind beneath his easygoing exterior. "My grandmother would have liked you," Abigail found herself saying as they finished the tour. "She always said the best students were the ones who asked the most questions." "High praise indeed," August replied. "I'd have liked to meet her. She died 5 years ago." "I'm sorry," he said, and she could tell he meant it. "Was she the one who taught you about your scar, too? How to care for it, I mean?" The direct mention of her scar made Abigail stiffen. No one ever referred to it so openly. "I'm sorry," August said quickly. "Was that too forward?" "No one ever. They usually pretend not to see it," she said quietly. "That seems a mighty strange way to treat a person," he said, frowning, "pretending not to see parts of them." "It's easier, I suppose. For them, maybe." August's gaze was steady. "Not for you, though, is it?" Abigail felt suddenly vulnerable, as if August could see straight through the carefully constructed walls she'd built around herself. "It happened when I was 16, she found herself saying. "Smallpox, I nearly died." "But you didn't," he said simply. "You survived. That's something to be proud of." Abigail. The way he said her name with respect, even admiration, made something shift inside her. "Would you like some tea?" she asked impulsively. "With the peppermint you brought." His smile could have lit up the darkest night. "I'd be honored." Inside her small cabin, Abigail felt suddenly self-conscious of its modest furnishings: the small table with its mismatched chairs, the shelves lined with books and jars of dried herbs, the quilt her mother had made draped over the back of a worn armchair. August, however, looked around with appreciation. "This is a proper home," he said, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. "Reminds me of my mama's place back in Texas." "You're from Texas originally?" she asked, busying herself with the kettle. "Born and raised near San Antonio," he confirmed. "Left when I was 18. Been working ranches all over since then: Colorado, Montana, now Wyoming." "You move around a lot," Abigail observed, setting out cups. August leaned against the doorframe, watching her work. "Used to. Been thinking lately it might be time to put down roots somewhere." "And you chose Fort Bridger." She couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. He shrugged. Good cattle country, decent folks mostly, beautiful scenery. His eyes lingered on her. All sorts of unexpected treasures, if a man knows where to look. Abigail felt heat rise to her cheeks and turned away to check on the kettle. The Caldwell Ranch is one of the largest in the territory, she said, changing the subject. You must be good at what you do to be hired as foreman. I know cattle, he said simply. And men. Both need a firm hand and a kind heart. They talked easily over tea, August sharing stories of his travels, Abigail occasionally offering anecdotes about Fort Bridger's colorful history. She found herself laughing more than she had in years, drawn in by his animated storytelling and genuine interest in her responses. When the shadows lengthened, and August reluctantly said he should head back to the ranch, Abigail walked him to his horse. Thank you for the tea, he said. And the company. Best afternoon I've had since coming to Wyoming. Thank you for the peppermint, she replied, and for listening about the herbs. Most people don't care to learn. Most people miss out on a lot of good things that way, he said, mounting his horse. Miss Forrester, would you permit me to call on you again? Abigail hesitated. She could already imagine the gossip in town if August O'Malley, the handsome new foreman, made a habit of visiting the scarred spinster. I don't think that would be wise, she said finally. People will talk. Let them, he said, his expression serious. I've never much cared what others think. You should, she insisted. You're new here. Your reputation is mine to build as I see fit, he interrupted gently. And I'd like it to include being friends with the most interesting woman in Fort Bridger. The word friends both relieved and disappointed her, though she chided herself for the latter feeling. If you're certain, she said cautiously. I am. He tipped his hat. Until next time, Abigail Forrester. As she watched him ride away, Abigail hugged herself against the evening chill, wondering what she'd just agreed to. True to his word, August began calling on Abigail regularly. Sometimes he'd bring small gifts, wildflowers, interesting rocks, once a book of poetry he'd traded for in town. Other times he'd simply arrive with stories or questions about her herbs. Occasionally, he'd help with tasks around her property, fixing her leaky roof or chopping firewood. The town noticed, of course. Whispers followed Abigail more persistently than ever when she ventured into Fort Bridger for supplies. What do you suppose she's done to bewitch that O'Malley fellow? Poor man probably feels sorry for her. Or perhaps he's after her land. Her father's plot connects to the Caldwell property, you know. Abigail tried to ignore the gossip, but it stung nonetheless. What hurt most was the realization that the townsfolk might be right. Why else would a man like August spend time with her? The question nagged at her, even as she looked forward to his visits with increasing anticipation. One warm afternoon in late June, August arrived looking unusually serious. Is something wrong? Abigail asked as they sat on her small porch. August twisted his hat in his hands. Heard some talk in town today, about us. Abigail's heart sank. I warned you people would talk. It's not the talk that bothers me, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. It's what they're saying about you, that you're using me somehow. That no man would willingly spend time with you unless he wanted something. Abigail looked away, blinking back sudden tears. Perhaps they're right to wonder. August moved so quickly she barely registered it, kneeling before her chair and taking her hands in his. Look at me, Abigail. Reluctantly, she met his gaze. You know what I see when I look at you? He asked, his voice low and intense. I see courage in every line of your face. I see intelligence in your eyes. I see kindness in your hands that heal. I see a woman who has faced cruelty with dignity and remained gentle despite it all. Abigail's breath caught. August, I'm not finished. he said firmly. "These past weeks have been the happiest of my life. Being with you feels right in a way nothing else ever has. Those fools in town, they don't see you, but I do, Abigail Forrester. I see all of you, and everything I see I admire." Tears spilled over onto Abigail's cheeks. "You can't mean that." "I've never meant anything more." August reached up slowly, telegraphing his movement, and gently traced the line of her scar with his fingertip. "This is part of you, but it isn't you. It's a map of a battle you fought and won." No one had ever touched her scar voluntarily before. The tenderness of the gesture broke something open inside Abigail, a dam of emotion she'd held back for years. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Do what? Trust, hope, believe that someone could." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Love you," August supplied softly. "Because I do, Abigail. I love you, and I aim to keep on loving you for as long as you'll let me." Abigail shook her head in disbelief. "We've only known each other a few weeks. Some things a man just knows," he said simply. "I knew the first day, when you looked me in the eye and didn't simper or flirt like most women do. You were just yourself, strong, a little wary, completely genuine." He rose and sat beside her on the porch swing. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. Just the chance to keep showing you how I feel every day until you believe it." "And if I never do?" she asked, her voice barely audible. August smiled gently. "Then I'll have spent my days with the woman I love. There are worse fates." Impulsively, Abigail leaned forward and pressed her lips to his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. August turned his head slightly, his lips now inches from hers. "May I?" he asked softly. At her nod, he closed the distance between them, kissing her with such tenderness that fresh tears sprang to her eyes. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I should warn you," he murmured. "I'm a stubborn man, Abigail Forrester. Once I set my mind to something, there's no turning back." "I'm beginning to see that," she replied, a smile blooming on her face despite her tears. The next day, Abigail entered the general store to find the usual hush falling over the patrons. This time, however, the silence had a different quality, less contemptuous, more curious. Mrs. Holbrook greeted her with something approaching warmth. "Good morning, Miss Forrester. Lovely day, isn't it?" "Yes, it is," Abigail replied cautiously. As she gathered her supplies, she overheard snippets of conversation. "Never seen O'Malley so worked up. Told Richards right to his face that Miss Forrester was worth 10 of him. Said any man who couldn't see her beauty was blind as a cave bat." Confusion mingled with a strange warmth in Abigail's chest. What had August done? She got her answer as she left the store. August was waiting outside, leaning against a hitching post, his face breaking into a wide smile when he saw her. "Morning, beautiful," he said loudly enough for everyone on the street to hear, taking her packages from her arms. "August, what are you doing here?" she whispered, acutely aware of the stares. "Walking my lady back home," he replied simply, offering his arm. "If she'll have me." After a moment's hesitation, Abigail slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow. They walked through town that way, August nodding politely to everyone they passed, while Abigail tried not to shrink under the attention. "What happened yesterday?" she asked when they were beyond the main street. Everyone was acting strangely. August's expression turned slightly sheepish. "Might have had a few words with some folks in the saloon." "What kind of words?" "The necessary kind," he said firmly. "Made it clear that you're a lady deserving respect and that anyone saying otherwise would answer to me." "August," Abigail stopped walking. "You can't fight my battles for me." "Wasn't fighting," he protested. "Just setting the record straight." "Besides," his expression softened, "these aren't just your battles anymore, Abigail, not if you'll let me stand beside you." The simple sincerity of his words disarmed her completely. "I'm not used to having anyone stand with me," she admitted. "Best get used to it," he said, resuming their walk. "I'm not going anywhere." Over the following weeks, August made good on his promise. Each day, he found ways to demonstrate his affection not just to Abigail, but to anyone watching. He would walk her through town proudly, bring flowers to her at the Sunday services, and defend her name fiercely whenever whispers reached his ears. The most remarkable change came in mid-July, when Mrs. Patterson, the mayor's wife, fell ill with a fever that the town doctor couldn't break. In desperation, her husband came to Abigail's door. "Miss Forrester," he said, hat in hand, "I know we haven't been neighborly, but I'm begging you, if there's anything you can do for my Eliza." August, who had been helping Abigail in her garden, stepped forward. "Miss Forrester is the finest healer in the territory, Mayor Patterson. If anyone can help your wife, she can." The vote of confidence bolstered Abigail's resolve. She gathered her herbs and followed the mayor to his home, where Mrs. Patterson lay delirious with fever. For 2 days and nights, Abigail worked tirelessly, applying poultices, brewing herbal teas, and cooling the woman's brow with lavender-infused water. August remained by her side, fetching fresh water, keeping the fire stoked, and ensuring Abigail remembered to eat and rest. When Mrs. Patterson's fever finally broke on the 3rd morning, the mayor wept with gratitude. News of the miracle spread quickly through Fort Bridger. Suddenly, the woman they had called strange and unlovable was being hailed as a gifted healer. More importantly, they had witnessed firsthand the devotion of August O'Malley, who spoke of Abigail with such pride and tenderness that even the most hardened gossips found themselves reconsidering their opinions. "You've changed things," Abigail told August as they sat by the creek near her cabin one evening in late July. "Not me," he said, skipping a stone across the water. "You did the changing. I just made sure folks noticed." "I never thought it was possible," she admitted, "to be accepted, to be—" She hesitated. "Loved," August finished, reaching for her hand. "You'd better believe it, because I plan on loving you for the rest of our days, if you'll have me." Abigail's heart stuttered. "What are you saying, August?" He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I'm saying that I want to marry you, Abigail Forrester. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to build a life with you, have children with you, grow old with you." Tears filled Abigail's eyes. "People will still talk." "Let them," he said fiercely. "They'll be talking about how August O'Malley is the luckiest man in Wyoming to have won the heart of Abigail Forrester." "Have you?" she whispered. "Won my heart?" August's expression softened. "Only you can answer that, Abigail." Looking into his earnest eyes, Abigail finally surrendered to the truth she'd been fighting for weeks. "Yes," she said simply, "you have." His face lit up with joy. "Then say you'll marry me." "Yes," she repeated, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you, August O'Malley." August let out a whoop that startled birds from nearby trees, then pulled Abigail to her feet and swung her in a circle. When he set her down, he kissed her with such passion that it left her breathless. "When?" he asked eagerly. "How soon can you be ready?" Abigail laughed at his enthusiasm. "Don't we need to plan, make arrangements?" "Already did," he admitted with a grin. "Spoke to the preacher last week. He can marry us any Sunday after services." "You were that certain I'd say yes?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Hopeful," he corrected. "A man can hope, can't he?" The following Sunday, Abigail Forrester became Mrs. August O'Malley in a simple ceremony attended by nearly the entire town. She wore a blue dress that Mrs. Holbrook had insisted on altering for her as a wedding gift, and carried wildflowers that the Caldwell children had gathered that morning. August, resplendent in his best shirt with his boots polished to a mirror shine, couldn't take his eyes off his bride. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, August's kiss was so full of promise and devotion that several women dabbed at their eyes. "Told you she just needed the right man," Mrs. Simmons was overheard saying afterward. "Always thought there was something special about that girl." August and Abigail settled into a small house midway between town and the Caldwell Ranch, combining their resources to purchase property that August had his eye on. With his knowledge of cattle and her expertise in herbs, they planned to build a life that included both their passions. Each morning before riding out to the ranch, August would kiss Abigail and tell her, "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever known, inside and out." Each evening upon returning, he would gather her in his arms and whisper, "Coming home to you is the best part of my day." In town, he made a point of treating her with such obvious adoration that the old whispers died away completely, replaced by sighs of envy from women who wished for a love as devoted as August O'Malley's. One afternoon in late October, as golden leaves drifted down around them while they walked through town, Abigail squeezed August's hand. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what, my love?" "For seeing me when no one else did." August stopped walking and turned to face her, framing her face with his hands. Right there on Fort Bridger's Main Street, with half the town as witnesses, he kissed her scar gently before moving to her lips. "Thank you," he countered, "for teaching me what true beauty is." Over the winter, Abigail and August's small home became known as a place of warmth and welcome. August had insisted on adding a proper room for Abigail's healing work, and patients began coming regularly, first from nearby ranches, then from as far away as Evanston when word of her skills spread. August took immense pride in his wife's growing reputation. "My Abigail can cure anything short of death," he'd boast to anyone who would listen. "And I wouldn't put it past her to try that, too." For her part, Abigail blossomed under her husband's love. The woman who had once hurried through town with downcast eyes now walked with confidence, returning greetings and even developing friendships with women who had previously shunned her. On a snowy evening in February, as they sat by their fire, August noticed Abigail's thoughtful expression. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. O'Malley." She smiled at the name she still hadn't fully grown accustomed to. "I was thinking about how much has changed in less than a year, how much I've changed." August set aside his whittling and moved to sit beside her on the sofa. "For the better, I hope." "Definitely for the better," she assured him, leaning against his solid warmth. "Though there's something I've been meaning to tell you, something that will change things even more." August's arm tightened around her. "What is it, love?" Taking his hand, Abigail guided it to rest on her abdomen. "We're going to have a baby," she said softly. "Come summer." August went completely still for a moment, then let out a joyous laugh. "A baby! We're having a baby!" At her nod, he gathered her in his arms, peppering her face with kisses. "Abigail O'Malley, you've made me the happiest man alive." Again. The news of Abigail's pregnancy spread through Fort Bridger like wildfire, aided by August's inability to contain his excitement. He took to carrying small trinkets in his pockets, a wooden rattle he was carving, a tiny pair of boots he'd commissioned from the cobbler, pulling them out to show anyone who expressed even the slightest interest. "Never seen a man so proud to be a father before the child's even born," the blacksmith commented one day as August described his plans to build a cradle. "That's because there's never been a mother as perfect as my Abigail," August replied with complete sincerity. Spring arrived with a riot of wildflowers and the promise of new beginnings. Abigail's body changed as their child grew within her, and August found new ways to demonstrate his love, rubbing her aching feet, building shelves for the baby's things, and telling stories to her rounded belly each night. "This child is going to know every day how much they're loved," he told Abigail as they lay in bed one night, "just like their mother does." Abigail turned to face him in the darkness. "I never thought I would have this," she admitted. "A husband who loves me, a baby on the way. Respect from the town. You deserve all of it and more," August said firmly. "And I aim to spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget that." In early July, just as the summer heat was settling over Wyoming, Abigail went into labor. August, who had been obsessively monitoring her every discomfort for weeks, sent for both the midwife and the doctor, pacing anxiously as Abigail was settled in their bedroom. "You need to calm down, Mr. O'Malley," the midwife told him sternly. "Your pacing won't help your wife. What can I do?" He asked desperately. To everyone's surprise, Abigail requested that August stay with her. "He's my strength," she insisted when the doctor raised his eyebrows. "I need him here." Throughout the long hours of labor, August never left Abigail's side. He wiped her brow, supported her back, and whispered encouragement when the pain became overwhelming. "You're the strongest woman I know," he told her again and again. "You can do this. We can do this together." As dawn broke over the mountains, their son entered the world with a powerful cry that made August laugh through his tears. "He's got your spirit," he told Abigail as the midwife placed the swaddled infant in her arms. "And your lungs," she replied wearily, smiling down at the red-faced newborn. "Hello, Daniel James O'Malley." August sat carefully on the edge of the bed, one arm around his exhausted wife, the other hand gently stroking his son's cheek. "He's perfect," he whispered in awe. "You're perfect. God, Abigail, I love you so much." The pride August took in his new family was boundless. He insisted on bringing Daniel to town as soon as Abigail was well enough to travel, parading him before everyone they met. "Have you ever seen such a handsome boy?" he would ask, carefully cradling his son for inspection. "Gets his good looks from his mother, thank the Lord." When anyone complimented the baby's strong features or alert eyes, August would nod knowingly. "Takes after his mama there, too. Smartest woman in Wyoming, my Abigail." On Sundays, the O'Malleys became the center of attention at church, with women cooing over Daniel and men clapping August on the back. Abigail, who once would have shrunk from such notice, now accepted it with grace, secure in the knowledge that the town's interest was genuine rather than malicious. As summer faded into autumn, the three settled into a rhythm. August continued his work at the Caldwell Ranch, but arranged his duties to allow more time at home. Abigail resumed her healing practice on a limited basis, with Daniel sleeping nearby as she mixed remedies or advised patients. One crisp October day, almost exactly a year after their wedding, August surprised Abigail by coming home at midday. "What are you doing back so early?" she asked, looking up from where she sat nursing Daniel. "Got something to show you," he said, barely containing his excitement. "Can you wrap up the little cowboy there? We need to take a short ride." Curious, Abigail settled Daniel in the sling she used to carry him and followed August outside where their wagon waited. They rode for about 20 minutes before August stopped at a ridge overlooking a beautiful valley. "What do you think?" he asked, gesturing to the expanse before them. "It's lovely," Abigail said, confused. "But what am I looking at exactly? Our future," August replied, his eyes shining. "I bought it yesterday. 160 acres of the best grazing land in the territory. We can build a proper house there, raise cattle, grow your herbs, everything we've talked about." Abigail gasped. "August, how? This must have cost a fortune." "Been saving every penny since I first met you," he admitted. "Plus, Mr. Caldwell gave me a mighty generous bonus after last month's cattle drive. Said I was the best foreman he'd ever had." He took her hands in his. "What do you say, Abigail? ready to build our dream." With Daniel nestled between them, Abigail looked out at the valley that would be their home. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, I'm ready." Over the next year, the O'Malley Ranch took shape. August hired men from town to help build a sturdy two-story house with plenty of room for their growing family. Abigail designed gardens for both cooking herbs and medicinal plants, and August acquired a small herd of cattle to start their operation. Word spread about Abigail's healing skills, and people began traveling considerable distances to seek her help. August built her a separate cabin near the main house where she could see patients, and her remedies became known throughout the territory. Mrs. O'Malley's willow bark tonic cured my rheumatism when nothing else would, one visitor reported. "She saved my daughter's life after the doctor gave up hope," said another. Each testimonial filled August with pride, but none of it surprised him. "Always knew my wife was remarkable," he would say. "Just took the rest of you folks a while to catch up." Daniel grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's charm and his mother's thoughtful nature. He followed August around the ranch, helping with chores, and sat quietly beside Abigail as she worked with her herbs, absorbing her gentle lessons. On Daniel's second birthday, as family and friends from Fort Bridger gathered to celebrate, Abigail pulled August aside. "I have a gift for you," she said, guiding his hand to her stomach with a meaningful smile. August's face transformed with joy. "Again? Really?" At her nod, he picked her up and spun her around, much as he had when she'd agreed to marry him. "Careful," she laughed. "I'm in a delicate condition, remember. Everyone," August announced to their guests, keeping an arm firmly around Abigail's waist. "We've got more than Daniel's birthday to celebrate today. Come spring, our boy's going to be a big brother." The cheers that followed were genuine and heartfelt. Mayor Patterson raised his glass in a toast. "To the O'Malleys, the finest family in Wyoming Territory." As twilight fell and their guests departed, August and Abigail stood on their porch, Daniel sleeping against his father's shoulder. "Look at what we've built," August said softly, gazing out at their ranch. "And it all started because I got lost and had to ask directions from the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen." "You weren't lost," Abigail said with a knowing smile. "The Caldwell Ranch is impossible to miss, even for a Texan. You made that up as an excuse to talk to me." August's laugh rumbled in his chest. "Caught me, saw you in that store and knew I had to find a way to meet you properly." His expression grew serious. "Best decision I ever made." "Mine too," Abigail said, leaning against him. "Letting myself believe that someone could love me." "Not just someone," August corrected, pressing a kiss to her scar, a gesture that had become his way of saying, "I love all of you." "Me. I love you, Abigail O'Malley. Always have, always will." In April of 1879, Eleanor Rose O'Malley joined the family, a tiny, dark-haired beauty with a determined cry in her mother's expressive eyes. August was, if possible, even more besotted with his daughter than he had been with his son. "She's got the look of an O'Malley woman," he declared proudly. "Strong, beautiful, going to break hearts someday." "She's 3 days old, August," Abigail laughed from her bed where she was recovering from the birth. "Let's not marry her off just yet." The ranch prospered as the children grew. August's cattle business expanded, and Abigail's reputation as a healer spread beyond Wyoming. Occasionally, she would receive letters from doctors in Denver or Salt Lake City, asking about her methods or requesting specific remedies. "Should have been a proper doctor," August would say proudly whenever such letters arrived. "Smarter than the lot of them put together." "I'm exactly what I should be," Abigail would reply. "A healer, a mother, a rancher's wife. Your wife." The children thrived in the freedom of ranch life. "Daniel," serious and methodical like his mother, showed a natural affinity for cattle and the business side of ranching. Alina, despite her father's initial protective instincts, proved to be fearless and adventurous, climbing trees and racing her pony across the fields with wild abandon. "She's going to give me gray hair before I'm 40, August complained good-naturedly after Alina's latest exploit attempting to lasso a calf on her own. "She's just like her father," Abigail pointed out, determined, courageous, and completely certain that the rules don't apply to her. As the years passed, the O'Malley Ranch became known as one of the most successful in the territory. August's innovative breeding practices and Abigail's sustainable approach to land management earned them respect in agricultural circles, and their home became a gathering place for neighbors and friends. What remained unchanged throughout was the obvious devotion between August and Abigail. Each morning, regardless of who might be present, August would kiss her and proclaim, "Have I mentioned today that I have the most beautiful wife in Wyoming?" Each night, he would hold her close and whisper, "Every day with you is better than the last." And Abigail, who had once believed herself unlovable, would smile and whisper back, "I love you too, August O'Malley, more than words can say." In the spring of 1885, when Daniel was nearing his 9th birthday and Alina was 6, Abigail discovered she was expecting their 3rd child. The pregnancy was more difficult than her previous 2, with bouts of weakness that concerned August deeply. "Maybe we should send for a doctor from Cheyenne," he suggested one evening as he sat beside her on their porch swing. Abigail shook her head. "I know what my body needs. It's just taking more of my strength this time." She placed his hand on her rounded belly. "Feel that? This one's a fighter." "Just like his mama," August said, the worry in his eyes softening at the strong kick beneath his palm. In November, after a labor that left August pacing frantically and praying harder than he ever had, Thomas William O'Malley arrived, small but perfectly formed, with a shock of red hair that made August laugh through his tears of relief. Where did that come from? He wondered, cradling his tiny son. "My grandfather had red hair," Abigail said wearily. "Looks like it decided to make an appearance." The birth had taken a toll on Abigail, and her recovery was slow. For the first time since they'd met, August saw fear in her eyes, not for herself, but for the possibility of leaving him alone with their children. "Don't you even think it," he told her firmly one night as he held her close. "You're not going anywhere, Abigail O'Malley. I won't allow it." "Since when do you give the orders around here?" she teased weakly. "Since never," he admitted. "But I'm putting my foot down on this one. We've got 3 children to raise and at least 50 more years together. That's the plan, and I expect you to stick to it." Gradually, Abigail regained her strength. By spring, she was able to resume most of her duties, though August insisted on hiring help for the heavier work. Their family settled into a new rhythm, with Daniel increasingly taking on responsibilities around the ranch, Alina mothering her baby brother with fierce protectiveness, and little Thomas, already called Tommy, observing everything with bright, curious eyes. As the children grew, so did the legends about their parents. In Fort Bridger and beyond, people told the story of Abigail Forrester, the scarred healer who'd been deemed unlovable until August O'Malley rode into town and saw what no one else could. "He fought 3 men who insulted her," one version claimed. "He stood up in church and declared his love," said another. "He built her a castle worthy of a queen," insisted a third. The truth, as Abigail and August knew, was both simpler and more profound. He had seen her, truly seen her, and loved what he saw. And in doing so, he had taught her to see herself through his eyes. On their 10th wedding anniversary, August arranged a surprise. While Abigail was visiting a patient, he gathered their children, their closest friends, and half the town for a celebration at the ranch. When Abigail returned home to find their property transformed with lanterns, flowers, and tables laden with food, she was momentarily speechless. "What is all this?" she asked as August approached her with a bouquet of wildflowers, the same kind she had carried at their wedding. 10 years deserves a proper celebration," he said, kissing her cheek. 10 years of loving the most remarkable woman I've ever known. The evening was filled with music, dancing, and heartfelt toasts. As twilight deepened, August called for everyone's attention. 10 years ago, he began, standing with his arm around Abigail, I rode into Fort Bridger looking for work and found something infinitely more precious. I found the other half of my soul in this woman. He turned to face Abigail directly. Some folks said you were unlovable. They were wrong. Loving you has been the easiest, most natural thing I've ever done, and I plan to keep doing it for at least another 50 years. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box. Had this made special, he said, opening it to reveal a gold locket. Inside was a miniature portrait of their family on one side and on the other an inscription, "Forever loved, forever cherished." As August fastened it around her neck, there wasn't a dry eye among their guests. Abigail touched the locket reverently, then stood on tiptoe to kiss him. "Thank you," she whispered against his lips, "for everything." "Just getting started, Mrs. O'Malley," he promised. "Just getting started." As the celebration continued around them, Daniel, Alina, and Tommy joined their parents, forming a circle of embraces that represented everything August and Abigail had built together, a family bound by love, a home filled with laughter, a legacy of healing and hope. Looking at her family, Abigail thought of the frightened, scarred young woman she had been when August first rode into her life. That woman couldn't have imagined this moment surrounded by love, respected by her community, confident in her place in the world. "Penny for your thoughts," August murmured in her ear. Abigail smiled up at the man who had changed everything. "I was thinking that some scars never fully heal, but with enough love, they become something beautiful, a reminder of strength rather than pain." August's eyes softened as he traced the line of her scar with gentle fingers, the gesture that had become their private symbol of complete acceptance. "You've always been beautiful, Abigail. I'm just grateful I was the man lucky enough to love you." As the night deepened and stars appeared above their ranch, August and Abigail O'Malley danced slowly in the circle of lantern light, surrounded by the life they had created together. And in that moment, both knew with absolute certainty that the whispers had been wrong. Abigail Forrester had never been unlovable. She had simply been waiting for the one man who would love her fiercely enough to make sure the whole world knew it, every single day.